The CIA, I would take it apart and dismantle it and begin again, seeing exactly what is necessary, because this has become a completely autonomous organization that doesn't answer to anybody in the United States government, including the president. So this is like the deep state that has its own autonomous, independent nature and acts without any oversight from the democratic processes or even the elected officials. They can't get a hold of it.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for April 29th through May 6, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, we featured 10-ounce silver Royal Mint coins at just $2.99 over spot per ounce. The 10-ounce Britannia, 10-ounce Royal Arms, 10-ounce Little John, and 10-ounce Merlin are all 4.9s fine, and we have a very limited quantity. Again, they're just $2.99 over spot per ounce while supplies last. Next, backdated 1-ounce gold Canadian maples are only $69.99 over spot. And finally, backdated 1/10-ounce Platinum UK Britannia are just $29 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're delighted to have this widely followed returning guest, Michael Rectenwald, the author of several books about how we get our freedom back from the globalists, is here with us again on Liberty and Finance. Michael, thank you for joining us this Friday, May 2nd, 2025.
Well, great to be here. Thanks for having me, Donegan.
You were in the running recently for the Libertarian Party candidate for president of the United States. And we wanted, at the time that you were in that candidacy race, we interviewed you and you said, were you to secure the presidency, you would eliminate a whole host of three-letter agencies that you felt had no place in our government, were not serving the people, but were administrative overhang at best, absolute tools of autocracy and so on at worst. Can you talk to us about, because there's been a lot of dust and smoke being kicked up in Washington. Trump just gave his first 100 days address to the nation, and they've certainly, between him and Doge, have been making a lot of pronouncements, executive orders, turning books open of financial records and things like that. We're told there's lots going on. We haven't heard of any agencies being closed of the government. We haven't heard of any firings. We haven't heard of any clawbacks of funds. In your view, could you start by telling us, maybe separate the good, the bad, and the ugly? Do you think anything specific that's good and valuable is being accomplished by this? And if so, what do you think is the good before we get to the bad and the ugly?
Sure. Just today, for example, I believe Trump signed an executive order to end funding for NPR and PBS, which is definitely good, because these are propagandists, and it's ridiculous for taxpayers to pay for propaganda being promulgated through these so-called public broadcasting institutions. So that's good. And then there's a lot of talk about getting rid of the Department of Education, which should definitely happen. I don't know that it will, but that would be a real boon. There's no way that the federal government should be overseeing education across the board. This should be left at the local level. And this would cause, of course, a lot of funding to be dried up at the local level, but that's what's needed. And there's a lot of bureaucracy involved, and that would be a great step. I mean, Doge has made some good moves and uncovered a lot of abuse, but so far we don't see any real spending changes. We've seen the same sort of spending coming through these bills, and there's no cuts of any significance. So that's problematic. In other words, they say they've uncovered all of these nefarious and somewhat fraudulent charges, and yet we don't see how these are being cut through the federal spending bills that have been passed. And so we're still running at a massive deficit, and we are still looking at increases in certain sectors. For example, the military, up to $1 trillion now. That's ridiculous for an annual budget. So there's been a lot of talk, and I'm not real impressed, frankly, with the whole Trump's first 100 days whatsoever. I think that it's been a lot of bluster and a lot of missteps, in my opinion, and especially in terms of free speech, where we're told that we're dealing with the free speech contingent of the United States, and yet we see protesters, some of them American residents, actually residents of the United States, being held and then held for deportation over what should be protected speech. We can't apply the Constitution should apply across the board, whether citizens or non-citizens are involved. I believe that the Constitution covers non-citizens, and I don't think that these student activists or protesters should have. I mean, this is just an outrage that we have our First Amendment being abridged and abrogated by this administration over unpopular speech that they deem to be a national security issue, which is just ridiculous. So there's a lot of qualms I have with this administration. It's not a libertarian administration. It has pretensions to being such, but when it comes down to when the rubber meets the road, I'm afraid it's fallen quite short, and in fact has overreached into authoritarian measures. And I find these very appalling.
In addition to the Department of Education and the others that you mentioned, are there any other changes of merit or changes of value that you're seeing at this time that you think, yes, this should be continue to be pursued? We may not have the fruit yet of that avenue of discovery or action, but that is they're on the right track, at least in some of these areas, before we move on.
Well, I think the deportations are correct in the sense that we have criminals running around who have been plaguing our social body, and they should be thrown out of the country. They should definitely be deported. So we're seeing some signs of that, but according to stats, I think even the Trump administration has fallen short of even what the Biden administration had deported. So we're really not. I mean, I think it's largely rhetoric. I think those sentiments and those ideas are correct, but they're not being pursued persistently and consistently across the board. So I think there's definitely room for significant improvement. But yeah.
How about border integrity of the country? Your comments?
Yeah, that's definitely improved. So we're seeing many less border crossings, and that's definitely good. So that's something that I would applaud and say we need more of, a continued border security, so that we're actually securing our own borders rather than worrying about the borders of other countries like Ukraine and so forth.
And you mentioned you're not impressed with actions in the free arena of free speech. Any elaboration on that?
Well, we saw students, foreign students, international students, but some of them actually U.S. residents, being arrested and deported or being held for deportation over speech critical of Israel, not in support of Hamas. There's no evidence of that. There are no evidence of any crimes having been committed. They're using an antiquated law to affect these arrests and deportations. And I think this is not a good precedent, because you'll have another administration do the same thing for other speech. And it could be speech that it's just politically not correct for that administration. So it sets a very bad precedent. Ron Paul has recently been talking about this in his opposition to the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. And that Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, or the AAA, if you will, I think it's a breach of the Constitution, of the First Amendment, and it's a very bad precedent to set. We had a student who merely wrote an op-ed with 3 other authors, co-authors, being snatched off the street, taken to a holding cell in Louisiana, and people don't know what's even happened to her. So this is just a very bad precedent, and I think it also speaks, frankly, to the I should say the overwhelming control of the U.S. government by Israeli lobbies, and their control over our political system and even our legal system at this rate. So, I mean, I think that's their own overweening power with reference to U.S. domestic and international policy has to be addressed. And this administration has proven to be even worse than the Biden administration in this regard.
What about sound money and financial privacy, private property rights, that group of concerns?
Well, there's been talk about the Federal Reserve. Obviously, that should be, I think, should be abolished, and we should have sound money. Trump has talked about gold. There's also some talk about stable coins being used as a way to divert from the dollar, and from the dollar into like a stable coin. I would think that in order to have sound money, it has to be backed by real assets. And that would be gold. And gold is probably the best asset to back any currency with. And yet I don't think that's going to happen by any stretch. I think instead there's going to be a move towards a stable coin. And that could also be backed by gold, but I don't think it will be. So I don't see much. I'm not seeing much to write home about in terms of the stability of the currency.
How about private property rights and preservation of financial privacy?
Well, I haven't seen any real changes on that front. So the private property rights, the first property, of course, is the property in oneself. And in that regard, there have been some, I think, encroachments on that with reference to free speech, because free speech is a property issue. I can explain that, but I mean, the fact is, we have property over ourselves. The first property one has is in oneself. That means being able to use oneself, one's body, one's tongue, one's pen, one's hand to write, one's vocal cords to speak in any way that one wishes, with the limits of it not encroaching on someone else's rights. And so that's I think, that's not been improved upon here. We had, of course, under the Biden administration, all kind of encroachments on free speech, and with censorship through big tech and social media platforms. We saw all kinds of violations of free speech and a free flow of information through the Biden administration. Now it's just moved into a different register with the Trump administration. They've just disallowing different speech. So it shouldn't be There should be no prejudice on the part of the government about how we use our First Amendment rights or how we use our property rights in terms of ourselves. The state should have no say in that matter. And it's having a say, and that's wrong. I'm not talking about this from a political standpoint as so much as from a principled standpoint of self-ownership.
Got the underlying principle, and that's one of the concerns that our viewers and subscribers and a lot of the guests on our channel have had over the past several administrations, is that idea that, guys, it doesn't matter if you got team red or team blue. If you're clamping down on people and denying them their constitutional freedoms or their natural rights, that same principle, the violation of that principle, can be applied against your team and your favorite messaging or whatever when the tables are turned. That doesn't make it right. How about taxation? Are you seeing any signs of any correct actions in your view in that regards, or any promising prospects of that?
Well, this would bring in the whole issue of the tariffs that are being floated and imposed and so forth as a way of offsetting or eventually eliminating the federal income tax. I don't like to replace one tax with another, and I think that the tariffs are a tax because they're going to affect people's buying power down the line, if not very soon. Specifically, Trump just tweeted, I think it was yesterday, that any country that buys any oil products from Iran will have their products completely shut down in the United States. This means that we wouldn't be able to buy products from China, India, and so forth. Any country that's receiving oil, buying oil from Iran. That's ridiculous. That is going to cost consumers tremendously because they'll be forced to either pay a high tariff or else be forced into actually going without certain commodities that they buy. So I think the income tax should be eliminated. Of course, tariffs, if properly imposed, could be a way to mitigate the losses in the short term. But some other method of funding the federal government should be found. One of the main means of funding the federal government is by cutting it.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. That's the elephant in the room that's not being talked about is, oh my gosh, how are we going to replace this onerous income tax that's feeding the largest employer in the country and this bloated that's not in the Constitution and none of that. It's like, so
right.
Next question to you, what about dismantling the administrative state?
Yeah, it's not happening at any rate that I see at present. I mean, I would have called for eliminating, frankly, the CIA, the FBI, and allowing local and state police to deal with crime in terms of the FBI and the CIA. I would take it apart and dismantle it and begin again, seeing exactly what is necessary, because this has become a completely autonomous organization that doesn't answer to anybody in the United States government, including the president. So this is like the deep state that has its own autonomous, independent nature and acts without any oversight from the democratic processes or even the elected officials. They can't get a hold of it. So I would dismantle it and start over and see what's actually necessary for example, in terms of foreign intelligence, where the CIA is concerned. Take it apart, dismantle it, and begin again. The FBI.
Yeah, clearly the scope and scale of this beast. It's like the Little Shop of Horrors when that plant grows up and it's basically eating everything in sight. It's like that was never. Well, I won't say it was never foreseen by our founding fathers. It was never foreseen by our founding fathers, and they, in horror of it, tried to prevent it from growing up from a little root into this big weed. And yet, the solutions that are being floated is how we can just shift the burden of paying for that huge monster to our offshore imported goods or other permutations of that, as you were describing. The tax. Go ahead.
Let me speak to the educational sector too, if I could, higher ed. I believe that all federal funding to all universities should be cut. But instead, what Trump is doing is politicizing it and cutting tax exempt status for like Harvard or other, Columbia or whoever else he's attacking, instead of doing something from a principled stand, cutting all funding for higher education and research and effectively all funds. And in terms of tax exempt status, not imposing it arbitrarily based on the political standpoint of the university in question, but rather doing it across the board. If you're going to cut tax exempt status, well, first of all, I don't believe in cutting tax exempt. I think everybody should be tax exempt. So I'm not trying to argue against tax exemption. But I just think that what he's doing is politicizing these policies rather than undertaking them from a principled standpoint. Cutting higher education funding should be done entirely, even student aid and loans, because this actually has driven up the cost of education tremendously, because when you have more supply of money for something, it raises the price. How can people not understand this?
This hit me in the forehead like a frying pan when I went with our eldest son to his parents' visit weekend at the state university where he attended and was enrolled. And I thought we'd be learning about academics and about it. No, 90% of all of the sessions that they had on our agenda for the weekend was about financial aid and work study programs and all these ways that you can get funding and apply for loans and all this stuff. And it became obvious that they were in the business of running a financial enterprise there with the gravy train of the government, and knowing that it pumps up the prices. And now they're going to be so helpful to you by explaining to you over an entire weekend how it is you can distort your entire life, like looking in a funhouse mirror to try to be able to afford this thing. Again, feed the beast.
And having been a professor at NYU for 11 years and 25 years in academia in general, I should say that what has happened is that these educational institutions have mirrored the federal government. In other words, they have added layers and layers of bureaucracy. As the federal government funds them, they have to add all this bureaucracy to make sure the funding is approved based on maintaining different standards, DEI and all that. And further standards beyond that. So we have administrative bloat in these higher educational institutions, which totally mirrors the administrative bloat in the federal government. So that's another reason why educational prices are out of reach, is because of the administrative bloat, and also just the unmitigated supply of dollars from the federal government, which is unreal. That's why the cost has gone up so high. So in that regard, there's
going to be three more major categories about these dollars in the gravy train: agriculture / food, health and medicine, and housing. So if you want to let us know your thoughts on each of those, maybe starting with agriculture and food, what the Trump administration seems to be heading towards, what you believe they are looking like they're going to accomplish, but maybe already have accomplished, what they ought to be doing in your view.
Well, I see them as attempting to raise the health standards through the MAHA movement, eliminating certain poisons from food and so forth, and also attempting to limit the consumption on the part of food stamp recipients and stuff like that. Whereas I think what should be done is all subsidies for agriculture be cut completely, utterly cut, and then let supply and demand determine what people will pay. And that's it. I mean, it's that simple. Why they keep doing this is beyond the pale. So they completely effectively inflate the price of food through these regulations and also subsidies. Or they may bring down some prices, but they affect the prices of other goods. I don't understand why they can't let the free market decide what people want. In terms of the food stamp requirements and cutting of soft drinks for food stamps, I think, I don't think the federal government should be dictating what people consume. On the other hand, we shouldn't be paying for it either. So I think that the food stamp program should be cut rather than just worrying about whether they buy soft drinks or not. I think the economy would improve dramatically if we got rid of 99% of these regulations. If we got rid of subsidies, you wouldn't have the monopolies, and you'd see the prices decrease across the board. I don't know. I think they need like an Austrian economist in place, and they don't have it. They don't, there was some talk of Ron Paul becoming involved in the administration, and that hasn't happened. I think they shied away from him because they know he wants to eliminate the Federal Reserve. And he would have a lot of other very, very dramatic, changes that he would advocate for. And I think that was too much. There's no question that the administrative state has vested interests in staying alive and growing. And there's, there will always be pushback when you try to go after it. And I think the administration's too beholden to various sectors of the economy to affect those changes, unfortunately.
Back when we were talking about the law enforcement aspect, you mentioned the FBI, CIA, et cetera. There have been some pretty grievous accusations of just almost horrific, unthinkable things regarding like the Epstein files and other things related to that. There was a big puff of smoke and dust for about a week there in the news cycle, and then tumbleweed the past month here. Do you believe that that's another example of something that's too hot to touch? It's going to be, okay, well, never mind. We're going to move on because we're actually middle management, and the upper management says,
says no.
Go.
The Epstein files is a case in point. I think it's too hot. It's the third rail, and it is too close or lies on the third rail in politics and international affairs. You have all kinds of deflections, about what the Epstein files would reveal, and they haven't been, released, of course. And of course, according to Pam Bondi, it's sitting on her desk. Well, whatever that means. Hopefully, not sitting literally on her desk, but in her possession, and yet this is not happening. So that tells me there's something in those files that impugns various members of the government, and also probably indicates tremendous malfeasance and foreign interference in U.S. political affairs.
That's one of the collateral impact of highly compromised, immoral things is not just the direct, which is terrible enough, the direct impact on the lives, the families, the marriages, the direct victims underage that are involved.
Yeah.
Some of that is it's just unthinkable. But then it also has national and international consequences on security,
privacy, government direction, policy, everything. So I think the policy implications would be too blatant if that was exposed. And that's unfortunate, right? So that shows that there's massive foreign and not just foreign, but domestic interference in political and policy based on private interests that would be compromised by the release of these files.
As a candidate of the Libertarian Party, that you were in the race to secure the nomination for the Libertarian Party candidate for presidency, you must have thought this through, and you must have had conversations with people about this. Is Michael, should you get nominated and should you be granted great power, you would be facing these dirty secrets, these closets full of skeletons, and you would be facing, if we really clean out this closet, it's going to mean a turning upside down of everything, and there are going to be huge forces at trying to stop that. The beast will be fighting back. The swamp will be fighting back.
Yeah, one of the things is I tempered my campaign by suggesting that the possibility of me winning would be greater than winning the lottery if I only played once. So I knew that it wasn't really in the cards. The point of the campaign was to get the message across. The message of liberty, the message which means the vast reduction in the federal government and its, this behemoth that is oppressing us. That's really what I was in the race to do. I didn't have any pretensions. I'm not delusional. I didn't have any pretensions about winning, but I did have a great deal of hope to use the campaign as a platform for getting across the ideas that I think have to be inserted into the national dialogue and confronted by the political class in general. And that's what I was running for.
Sounds like,
but yes, I would have been killed.
You would have hoped for the ability to be the kid at the side of the parade who says the emperor has no clothes on, and get everybody with our sleepwalking, because once they hear, that's part of the free speech. Once the message comes in the ears and takes place in the mind, it's like, yeah, why do we have to do this? And why is this being taken away from us? And why can't we have freedom here? Right. And why do we have to pay for this? And
exactly,
those questions need to be talked about and thought about. It needs to be discourse in the public thought. So you were trying to expand the mind share of freedom.
That's right.
Hearts and minds of the people.
Yeah.
So,
and of course, I think there was interference in the Libertarian Party process, which, in my opinion, probably had something to do with probably another, the Republican Party's interference, I believe, actually, is what took place. But
this wouldn't be the first time we've heard of the neutering of the Tea Party, infiltration of other groups that were trying to make a difference, went the way to make them neutralized or insignificant or blunt their impact. And that's, I guess, to be expected in any contact sport where they're...
So the LP ended up with an LGBTQAI++ activist. That's what happened. And that was supposedly liberty, liberty to be perverse, liberty to, commit chemical castration on children, liberty, things like that, which was just anathema to me, and anathema to liberty, in my opinion. But I'll leave it at that.
So where do we go from here, in your view? Well, first of all, where are you going in forward in your writing? Where can people find that? And what do you recommend people who want to make a difference, who want to start clawing back to the extent possible in this world, our freedom to take action?
Well, what my campaign was based on was decentralized revolution, and that means wresting power away from the federal government and vesting it in people at the local level. And that means effectively a decentralization movement that gets the federal government out of our lives as much as possible through local empowerment. And that's what I would suggest people do. Local politics, such that we can nullify unconstitutional federal and even state law. Effective kind of secessionism doesn't necessarily have to be a formal secession, but a kind of, reclaiming of our own sovereignty through decentralization and down to the individual level eventually. So I argue that people should look to forming private property enclaves that will basically starve the beast.
Remind us again how people can find your Substack account where they can get your latest writings.
Yes, my Substack is mrectenwald.substack.com. That's mrectenwald.substack.com, and then my main website is michaelrectenwald.com.
Michael Rectenwald, thank you for joining us again on Liberty and Finance. We'd love to be able to get updates from you as we move forward here, because this is a fight worth fighting for the freedom of our speech, the freedom of our integrity, the freedom and restoring our Constitution, restoring our republic. Thank you for being here on behalf of freedom lovers all over our country.
Thanks for having me, Donegan. My pleasure.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for April 29th through May 6th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, we featured 10-ounce silver Royal Mint coins at just $2.99 over spot per ounce. The 10-ounce Britannia, 10-ounce Royal Arms, 10-ounce Little John, and 10-ounce Merlin are all 4.9s fine, and we have a very limited quantity. Again, they're just $2.99 over spot per ounce while supplies last. Next, backdated 1-ounce gold Canadian maples are only $69.99 over spot. And finally, backdated 1/10-ounce Platinum UK Britannia are just $29 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.